All right. I want to. The earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. There's wisdom from the white elk, and this is Where's the Balance. Welcome to episode 5, and we have today a returning first guest, who is technically now our second guest, Jenny Cook. How are you, Jenny?
I'm doing okie dokie.
She's doing okie dokie. And as usual, I have my sidekick, my brother in glasses and arms, who I've called Kendall before, but his name is actually Randall. How are you doing, brother Randall?
I am good, thank you. How are you, Rawle?
I'm dangerously well, my friend.
Oh, dangerously well.
Dangerously well. Yeah, just flowing. You know, the more I flow, the more things just come. The more you flow, you stay in the moment. So
exactly that brilliant statement. And Jenny, actually, that was a post either this last week or this week. It was about where the lunar energy was at and just accepting flow. And when you're in flow, how it just breathes all the way through, and you just let flow go and let it take you where it's supposed to go.
Yeah,
exactly.
And flow is not about just flowing with the good. It's about flowing with all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. And I find the more I do that, the more I go through it. But it's not so good going through it. I find when I'm in that flow, I'm really present in the moment. Yep. And it's only in the moment you have access to all your skills and your tools so you can deal with things. So yeah, so I've been really feeling present, and it's been reflected in my poetry. I was telling Jen before you came on, excuse me, that I wrote a new piece on the environment. I was invited to submit a poem to an environment anthology that's coming up. A gentleman friend of mine, a journalist out of Nicaragua, does a lot of publishing of poetry. So I don't know, he heard some craziness about me and reached out and personally invited me to submit a poem or two. I said, well, let's just start with one. So I wrote something on the environment, and actually, if you guys don't mind, can I share it with you? Maybe we can use it as a jumping off point to talk, because I do want to talk about the environment, from a people standpoint. That's why I read that quote at first, because I think it's so apropos that we keep forgetting that we're all on this planet together, and we're all in this together. And it's not that Mother does not want us to use the resources, but it's how. And I am one that believes that global warming, climate change are natural phenomena, they're natural systems of this planet. But common sense says to me that we are definitely speeding up or adding to those processes. And I don't think you can be a smart person and not realize that. You know, it's like, I don't know, if there's an open fire and you pour gasoline on it with the expectation it's going to douse it, that's stupid.
Anytime you add an accelerant to anything that's already in flow or burn or go or whatever it is, anytime you add an accelerant, it is going to excel.
Yeah, it's going to excel. And we are definitely excelling. And that's what's going on. So anyway, let me indulge you, since I have a captured audience. Right now, I'm calling it the original goddess. On this day, at this moment, my pen is hesitant to push past my fears. I'm taking responsibility for my part as I walk upon that which sustains. For she's the original goddess and reacts to our greedy and insensitive ways. Glacier melting, who cares as we drive for profits in the eye of the storm? Are we really surprised by the current state of affairs on the sixth rock to the sun? Global warming and climate change are natural systems that govern her temperance. But common sense says not being mindful is a good way to burning down the house. I believe the climate crisis is a direct correlation to how we treat and value each other. For it does not matter the intersectionality of the isms, for it's all a slow death sentence. Battles and wars are fought over race, religion, sexual orientation, and identity politics. As a thermostat seems stuck while we wonder why deforestation and rising sea levels. Homes are lost and reclaimed by the sea, and in return, the choice is to migrate or die. What happened to life, liberty, and the pursuit of water for those are not a privilege, but a right beyond the struggle, as many is losing the fight for their own sovereignty. If we're not careful, I can't breathe will become a battle cry through masked faces. We all share this planet, and we're all stewards to ensure the balance of her ecosystem. I am one voice of many voices speaking for Big Blue, planet Earth, my home, our heaven. Let us stop acting like there's another Earth waiting in the wings. The blind man in the room with the elephant doesn't care about right or wrong. It is time we get past our arrogance of ignorance, for we all have a seat at the table. We cannot own her, for she's not ours to own, for our stay on her is brief. Mm-hmm. Civilized and intelligent, powerful words if we truly want to be united, we stand. Otherwise, the alternative is united, we fall. The choice is up to us. End of piece.
Stunned silence. Prolific.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the dream I had last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You tell.
It was like I woke up and I was really sad, and I dreamt that like the last tree on earth was cut down. And that heartfelt, like the heart sinking. It was like, what did we just do? Yeah.
Yeah. That's a powerful dream.
Yep.
That's a very powerful dream. Kind of ties into what I just read.
Yeah.
I only just wrote that yesterday too. So maybe I tapped into your dream somehow.
Yeah.
I was asked several months ago. I was on a call, first time call, group of individuals. I knew one in the room, and it was okay. And it was more of like a coaching call and just conversations around a bunch of different coaches in different areas. And one of the questions they asked was, what would be the last thing you would do if you knew today was your last day on Earth? Okay. Well, that's a pretty loaded question for a lot of individuals. And my answer totally flows into where you guys went here. I said I'd garden, I'd plant a tree. I'd invite, my kids, my family, my whatever, into the backyard, I don't care. I would garden, and that the tree would be the thing, the biggest piece of what was going to be in this garden. And I was asked, why the hell would you garden on your last day? And I said, there's only one way to leave a living legacy and to have a place to return to. And if I plant a tree, that tree is a memory to my family and to my kids, but that tree is going to be something for somebody else down the road. And all I did was put a seed in the ground.
That's so well said, Bobby. Well done.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So true though. Right. That's one of the reasons I wanted to start with this, because, having Jenny back, and I think we touched on it a little bit, maybe dive in a little bit more. And it's not so much about getting you to speak for all indigenous voices, but just where you live, again, in your part of Saskatchewan, in your part of Canada. Do you see the effects of climate change, or do you feel it?
Oh yeah, like we just got over this heat wave. And it was pretty intense. But we see it everywhere, like in our bugs. we have these spruce beetles. They're called muscatygums. They're like that big, and when they bite you, it's really painful.
They're
And
vicious.
yeah, and before we could hear them coming, and they were big, a good size. This year you can't hear them. And there's a lot smaller. So we see it even in the bug's life. I know.
Shout out to Pixar. Whatever they're called.
Yeah. But like we see it everywhere. We see like these logging trucks, the whole Final Destination thing. Everyone fears that up here because they are just cutting down the trees up here, and it's disheartening for us.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, how can we stop? But it's the big corporations, and they don't really give us a say in anything about it.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite funny because I took this sustainable harvesting course that my sister-in-law offers, and it's about harvesting medicinal plants in our area and how to like recognize when people are doing it that is not sustainable.
Right.
And it was really interesting because with all these big corporations coming in, they are wrecking all the medicines up here. And these medicines like fireweed, it's really good for many, many ailments of the human body. And they're just like destroying them.
Yeah. And that's happening around the world. I mean,
yeah.
Just think of the heavy deforestation that's happening in the Amazon and the amount of medicine we've lost. Medicine in regards to plants, the animals that are being destroyed or having to migrate or die, like I said in the poem. Yeah, and it's funny. Last night I was listening to a gentleman from Sweden that's very deeply involved in climate change and global warming, and he is of the mindset that we are definitely contributing to what's going on, but he also believes that the hysteria around it and the fear that they're using is probably more damaging than what we're actually physically doing. And I agree with that. The biggest commodity that we're selling on this planet right now is fear. And he talked about how over the last 100 years, how we've actually been more kinder and better to the environment, but we don't hear those stories. He talked about looking at the research. He goes, one of the best ways to fight climate change and global warming in the sense of how we take care of the environment is actually to uplift more people out of poverty. Because he used the number, he goes, for the last 150 years, he goes, previous to when we really figured out how to use fossil fuel, he goes, probably 90% of the planet was in poverty. Because most people act like we all came out of riches and then we became poor. And that's a lie. Thomas Sowell talks about that. He goes, we all started out of poverty. And he goes, capitalism is actually the only system that's uplifted so many people out of poverty. But, you hear the fear-mongering about it. Now, having said that, this version of capitalism we're practicing is, I don't call it capitalism because it does a bad thing. It gives capitalism a bad name because my understanding of true capitalism is providing a service of value and then exchange monies. It's very simple. But there's also the human component that we have completely relegated to the sideline. So we're just strictly now profit. So it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what we affect as long as the bottom line is met. And I saw that a bit in my corporate days. It didn't matter what we said or did as long as the bottom line was met. And that's the danger because, like I said, I don't, excuse me, I think that bug you were talking about flew in my throat. It doesn't matter what we say or do. If we're all going to be pumped in fear, we're going to buy into the narrative of the story. And then people are like, well, it doesn't matter what, you know, it doesn't matter if I do anything, it's all going to hell in a handbasket anyway. And I think that's the danger, because, you know, that's why I started the show with that quote. We all live on this planet. And to me, the resources are for us all. And it's how we share it. And then when you do look at the numbers, man, right now on the planet, there's maybe 10% of the population that still lives in poverty. Now, how you define those lines, that's up for debate. But we assume that the majority of the world is poor, and that's not the case. We're not killing each other the way we used to. We're not harming the planet the way we used to. Having said that, there's some truth that we are causing. We're speeding up processes that take thousands of years to play out. Right? So I just found this.
I'm going to validate that really quick for you, Rawle,
Sure,
since I really appreciate that. And people like numbers and statistics. Even if numbers and statistics are wrong, people believe numbers and statistics. In 2021, the world poverty rate was 9%. 9% of global population are living in quote unquote extreme poverty, living on less than $1.90 a day. 9% of the 7 billion plus people are living in what's classified as extreme poverty. Now, I'm not going to go digging in further to that, because that would take us a whole other tangent for a whole other time frame. But yeah, I just wanted to, you said maybe 10%, and just people like to hear numbers and statistics, so I can quickly grab that for you.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's good to know. You know, we're living in a time now where facts, data, and truth don't seem to matter. And when I say truth, I don't mean my truth. My truth is based on my experience, but I'm talking about absolute truth. And there are absolute truths. An absolute truth is the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. I have not once ever experienced it the other way. And
the moon is a 28-day cycle, you know?
Yeah. And there's only 2 planets in the solar system that's reversed, where they rise in the east and the west is set in the east. So there are absolute truths, but we seem to live in a time now that doesn't matter what the topic is, truth and data don't matter. But okay, so it doesn't matter. I don't have to be a scientist to see and feel. You know, I remember when we were kids, it got hot, like blistering hot, but it just feels like the heat today is different. It's intense.
And that's a conversation I have with, you know, even with the kids, my kids, right? We're at home, and it's like that, you step outside and that sun is immediately hot, right? Where, you know, we used to have this, and I mean, it's July, right? This used to happen, but this sun just feels different. And it's not like we have less ozone or more ozone, because we're hearing stories now, you know, ozone deficiencies were a thing of our childhood and growing up, and we're actually hearing the ozone is repairing itself. So clearly we've done some good things. Again, back to, you know, Rawle, what you had said before, like we are improving. But to Jenny's comment and the deforestation and not having a choice or not having a play or a word in the story, I think also comes down to humans themselves are some of the worst pollutants, right? We have 7 billion people living in a place that probably doesn't sustain 7 billion people plus, right? And we keep growing. And if we keep growing, we continue building houses, we continue doing things, and we're going to continually cut down trees. Now, I mean, we've done some nasty things and we've done some okay things. And so, I mean, there's some balance in that, but the more people that show up, the more we provide, the more resources we use to continue sustaining the more people that show up, to the point where there will be, you know, we talk about non-renewable resources, right? These are our fossil fuels. Eventually they will be gone. What will we do if the trees are gone? We're all just going to start digging our own graves, because it's going to happen, right? If we're not smart about it.
Well, if that happens, then, you know, my understanding, trees are what help produce oxygen and remove carbon dioxide from our air system. Now, having said that, you know, carbon dioxide is not a bad thing. It's a feeder to the system. That's one of the things that people, I sometimes wonder what people really know, you know, and technology has definitely uplifted us. You think about previous to the early 70s, where I remember hearing a lot about acid rain and all these things, and the serious fog of haze of pollutants that you saw and felt. I think we actually were bigger polluters back then than now. And then air quality was a major issue. What did technology do? We came up with the catalytic converter that were put on cars that help with emissions. And that brought our emissions down drastically.
But yet we created things that became highly disposable from that, right? So we may have improved the vehicle and we may have improved the emissions 100%. We improved, but we did things like disposable clothing. We did things like value chains, discount stores, stuff like that, where
bottled water.
But there's that too. In some areas in Saskatchewan and in Canada, we know that bottled water, right? Jenny can speak to this. We know that bottled water is an essential piece of life because they're still missing the mark on what water means at a federal level, which shouldn't be a problem realistically, but it appears to be.
Why do you think that is, that water is still something that we debate about? I remember years ago, the Nestle chairman at the time saying water is not a right, it's a privilege. When
it's a sustainable life source.
CEO says something like that, what does that tell you?
Well, let's look at the droughts in California and how they're functioning without water.
How do you see the water play where you are, Jen? Have you noticed a difference? I mean, for one that spends a lot of time in nature, what have you noticed? I don't want to assume.
Well, like where I live, we are like the 10th biggest lake in Canada. And
where is that again? In what lake?
L'Orange.
L'Orange, okay.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of everything. We see a lot of pollution up here. Like before we would be able to just take a cup of water and drink it from the lake. Now we can't do that because of all the gas and the garbage that end up in that lake. We have springs here, but it takes a while to get there. As for the bottled water, I would have to say that a lot of households up here do still rely on bottled water because our pipes are so old. Like we still have the copper pipes. Like we haven't updated our water system up here for a while. And it's like, I know we have a fair coming up here this weekend and bottles of water are going to go for like $5. And it's like, and everyone's pushing this need for water, and understandably, like we're 80% water and we need it, especially with these heat waves. It's more intense, like what Randall was saying.
I just find that it's beyond ignorance that we charge for water. $5 for a bottle of. I remember when bottled water came out. I think it was probably the late 70s, 80s, and I was like, really? We're selling water in bottles? But that definitely has contributed to a lot of what's going on into our landfills, in our oceans, the plastic. So to Randall's point, we've done some good with technology, but on the other hand, look at what we're also doing. And I think that's the key. So when I was listening to this gentleman talk, he was being interviewed on Unknown Knowledge, which is a show from the Hoover Institute. And I go to the Hoover Institute a lot to hear certain viewpoints on what's going on. And I go, you make a very good point, but you're also not talking about the other side of what technology does from the negative aspect, right? So you just want to make it sound like technology is key to uplifting us out of poverty, which is true, and helping keep the planet safer or cleaner. But on the same hand, technology is contributing greatly to our ecosystems. I mean, the Earth is one big ecosystem made up of all these different ecosystems. We're also contributing greatly to keeping these ecosystems out of balance. And I think we as stewards, that's our main job, is to ensure that the ecosystem is balanced. Because if she's balanced, we can then use the resources in a respectful balance. So that's why I put the word mindful in how we take. We're not being mindful in how we take. right? So that's why, it's funny to talk from a blanket statement, but you're someone that lives in rural Saskatchewan. And I actually heard your town's name mentioned, or it's a city town, mentioned. My nephew was in Kelowna for Football Canada under 18 tournament, and there was a kid from Saskatchewan from L'Orange. So I heard it and I go, oh, that's Jenny's hometown. So you mentioned the big lake. What's the name of the big lake?
It's L'Orange, Lac l'Orange.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What were you going to say?
Like when it comes to electric cars, like you were saying, it's good that we are thinking that way, but how much pollution are we actually causing when we charge up the batteries for those electric cars?
How much pollution is after the fact when you have to change those batteries, and what do we do with those batteries?
But look at what we have to do to get the components to make electric cars and for the batteries.
Yeah.
We have to mine, and we are using fossil fuels to mine these things to put in. It's like our cell phone that has gold and all these other things. It's like, so we're talking sustainability, but yet we're still reliant on fossil fuel. And, this is one of the things that we don't talk about. It's like, everyone's pushing, in the States, particularly in the States, I don't feel it so much here in Canada. They're really pushing the electric car. Well, to buy an electric car, I think the minimum, it starts at like $50,000. Not many families can afford $50,000, and that's maybe on the low end. But we don't even think about what goes into these so-called things that are supposed to be good to the environment, because on the packaging, it sounds good, but on the back end, when you put up these wind turbines, we don't stop to think about the clearing of the land and all the animals that are displaced,
the environmental impact,
and the environmental impact, and the medicine that we potentially lose to build these so-called things to provide green energy. So it's really not green. And we're not in a place where we can fully say no more fossil fuel. We're going to live off of green energy. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Because you guys live in a really cold part of Canada. Are you willing to freeze your butt off? Because you know what I mean?
No.
So it's like, what are we doing? What are we saying? And it's like, fossil fuel is not the problem. The problem is just we keep adding things that we keep pouring more gas on the fire, and not going, okay, stop. Let's pull back. Let's look at what we need to do. Are the policies in place? Maybe we need to invest in more R&D as opposed to subsidizing green energy that's not produced. We spend billions of dollars in subsidizing for green energy. What's the return on investment?
Well, and we talked about this in the last show, right? This is a policy. This is a policy of all the developed nations, right? Whether it's the 7, the 12, or the 22, it is a policy. Let's get green. Well, how do we get green? Let's create a group in every country to figure out how to get green, and we'll share all of our thoughts, and we'll be the hub, and we'll whatever. But all we have at the end of the day is a bunch of policies made from subcommittees who think they have all the answers, or have tapped into wherever they get the answers from. We're still reliant on policy, which brings us back to people expecting the government to make everything better.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, you want to stop global warming? Okay. How are you going to do that?
Well, I'm not turning off my heat in the middle of January. It's not going to happen.
But that's my point. So we have a bunch of people, we got to stop global warming. Okay. How are you going to stop global warming? How?
Well, we're no longer burning coal, so we did improve from that.
That's not true. We are some places.
Well, there's true.
The point,
But the point being, we have created other ways, right? We got away from burning oil, right? But we got into natural gas, sure. We got into electric cars, sure. All that product is a byproduct of something.
And natural gas is still fossil based.
Absolutely, it is.
It is not green; it's fossil based. So it's like, what are we doing? This is for me, is this everything is just politicized now. We don't know what's truth and what's not truth.
Well, and people that are blind to wanting to do their own research and reliant on just either what they're finding on social media or what the news is saying or what they believe the government policies are going to protect.
Yeah.
When, I mean, do you like, or have you purchased, or do you know somebody who owns clothing that doesn't wrinkle? That's made with plastic. That's a petroleum byproduct.
This is
right?
what I'm wearing is probably petroleum based.
You know, I mean, and our listeners, not necessarily our viewers, but our listeners at home, raise your hand if you own Tupperware or Rubbermaid or any of those plastic brands, right? The lid of your glass jar, right? Or of your glass Pyrex bowl, petroleum byproducts.
Keith, Randall, our glasses is petroleum. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. You know. It's like, I mean, we and this is, I think, where I mean, we talk about how to be green, how to become better, how to do all these other things, but we've also, and I want to highlight this, right? Because technology has brought us a long way, good and bad. It has highlighted many things, but we became better. And yes, there's always room for improvement. I never believe anything is 100% because we always have room to improve or to learn something different, to be able to bring on a different experience. You have to be open and willing to learn, which means you're not 100%. But if we just look at all of these things, what are we learning? What can we do, right? We've become better with petroleum byproducts. I mean, in the 70s, yes, there was plastic making companies, but it's not like it is today, right? We still had glass jars. We still had metal lids. We still had these things, as you know, we're regulars where, and I mean, we're seeing a little bit of a swing back that way with people wanting to remove some of the plastics, especially when the big BPA crisis came out with specific water bottles, and then all plastics were reviewed, and then, you know, things we improve. So I mean, there's some technological advances within that industry even that I think, you know, we can't dismiss, right? There's some good in the mix.
Here's something I think you'll both find interesting, kind of tagging along on your point, Randall. I can't remember where the place, I think it was somewhere in Western Canada. It might be in the States, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a store chain now removing these the cloth grocery bags. They how they remove plastic bags out of groceries and went to these cloth bags. Well, they're going back to plastic. You know why? Because now they're realizing that these cloth bags are carrying around bacteria. Because food spills into the bag, people don't wash their bags, all this stuff. So it's now causing health issues. So instead of people don't, we're lazy by nature to some degree. So they're now removing that because it's becoming a health issue, because obviously those contaminants don't get attached to plastic bags. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So
I want to jump on that for a second, Rawle.
Say that again.
I want to jump on that for a second.
Yeah.
Because in our federal policies, single-use plastics are to be removed by, I think it's the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So, yeah. I think so, yeah.
So everybody and their dog, save for one company that I frequent, a smoothie come and go kind of company, has switched to paper straws. Well, paper straws are awful if you don't intend on drinking your drink in the next 5 minutes, right? One company, it is a paper wrapped straw, but the straw is made of plastic, compostable plastic, right? So they have figured out, whether it's corn husk or whatever else, right? They have figured out how to make a compostable plastic. Their lids, I believe, are also the same. Every time I am there, I grab 1 or 2 extra, because Lord knows I'm going to end up somewhere where somebody hands me a paper straw and I don't have, my metal straw, and here's another one, right? Like we use metal now instead of, right, all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. I keep 1 of those or 2 of those plastic straws in my car because I know they're compostable.
Yeah.
They are single use, but one company has figured it out. Well, if one company has figured it out and you get it for free when you buy your drink, right? And I can grab 1 or 2, they sit on a container out in the open. Why do we have to have, say, a paper straw? Which brings us back to our deforestation conversation, right? Where in this balanced cycle do we start to see the imbalance? We're using a ton more paper. We're in a paperless society. I've never touched more paper in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're like, I remember we're going paperless, we're going paperless, we're going paperless. And now all of a sudden I've got triple the amount of paper anytime I'm doing something, right? Anytime. It's like, is it because paper's easy, because it's there, because we have access to it, or because we really cannot just function as a paperless society and we do need some elements of paper in our lives? Right? Another massive chain store, you need a membership to shop there. The bags in their meat department are compostable plastic, but yet you go to any other type of grocery store, those bags are not, right? In the produce or meat or whatever, right? You want to pick up a bag, they're not compostable. So how have some organizations figured this out and others haven't? Is it a cost issue, or is it because, I mean, cost is always a factor, right? Bottom line for organizations always matters. I work in finance. I understand bottom line and what you have to bring in order to make bank. However, if the policy at a federal level exists and organizations are proving they can do this, right? There's, I believe, I won't name it's a Frito-Lay, I think is the company, but one of the brands in the Frito-Lay group of companies, their bag of chips, the bag is compostable. One. And Frito-Lay is the umbrella of several brands. So why is only one, right? Where is the balance? If we know these products are available and we have scientific proof that they do break down, and sure, maybe it might take a little bit longer, but we've proof these things are actually composting, reducing our garbage and reducing our need. Why is there no policy on that? Why is there no protection in that, right? Other than bottom line.
Well, when we figure out how to put subsidies to those manufacturers or encourage them. I mean, a lot of it is policy and things are subsidized. Why is it that we live in a world or live in a country where we can't drink whole milk? Why can't I go to the store and get milk right from the cow?
Raw milk.
Because the milk lobby, the milk bureau is a powerful entity, and it protects not small farmer, big agricultural farmers, because of the subsidies and so forth that they get. A lot, that's one of the things I agreed with the gentleman I was talking about last night. We need to remove these subsidies and put the monies into research and development, because there are organizations, companies out there doing stuff like that. I think it was the Winter Games in Tokyo. It was one of the recent Olympic Games where a lot of the medals and the podiums were made from recycled plastic and rubbers and that sort of thing. And a lot of things were built from 3D machines and stuff. So we do have the technology now. Whether or not it's at the point where it's really cost effective to be mass produced, that's a different story. I mean, it takes money to bring these things about. So, I'm not foolish and go, well, just do it for the greater good, because I don't know what the greater good means anymore. But I think a lot of it is we need to get government out of business. Now, doesn't mean
government is business.
Well, government's become a business. Government was never a business.
Sorry, they function like a business.
No.
Business model.
No, they don't. No, they don't. If they function like a business, I think government would be a lot more effective and efficient.
Well, sure, they would be watching their bottom line.
So now, having said that, it's not like all businesses are doing it right and being conscious as well. So, this is why, again, all these talks kind of, reiterate why we call this show Where's the Balance? It is a balance. But, we can get off onto the high tangent of this. I want to keep this local and in Jen.
Yes.
So in your circle, Jen, is that a concern for people in your world, the climate, what's going on, or is it more everyday survival? Because for me right now, I'm a single man. I live very, very meagerly. I don't need much, but living here with my sister and watching her and her husband trying to keep food, and these are two working professionals. Trying to keep food and gas in the car right now is beyond a struggle. And these are people that make good money. It's not like, they're working fast food to try to maintain a family of four kids. So, what's the struggles for the people in your circle?
There's so many. If I would have to pick a struggle, I would have to say probably the economics in my area. Yeah, because like I work full time and I'm doing like 2 side hustles. I shouldn't have to do that. But because like where I live, the cost of living is so much higher than where Randall's living, and we just live 4 hours apart. And it's hard. Like I have fuel efficient vehicles, thank God. Because like if it wasn't for them, I probably would be having another side hustle just to keep ends meet.
And
you're a teacher.
Yeah.
Full-time teacher.
A full-time teacher.
And you still have to have 2 side gigs to make ends meet.
Yeah.
What does that say?
I know.
Because I don't know. It says to me we don't value teachers at all. Right? That a teacher, and what does a teacher do? They inspire. But they inspire.
There was a thought process.
It was a rhetorical
I totally saw
question.
that.
Well, Jen, what does a teacher do? Well, I sit by my blackboard. But a teacher inspires and educates and hopefully teaches young people how to think and to learn and to be life learners and all these things. And yet you're working with what we supposedly like to brag about is the most important commodity that we have, which is our young ones. And yet the ones that spend so much time with them, that are helping to shape them and mold them, are the ones we devalue. Right?
And that's why the teacher burnout is so high. Like in Canada or in Saskatchewan here, I think it's 5 years.
Yep.
A teacher's burnout
That's
rate
the
is.
average. Wow.
Yeah.
And I know it's a huge problem in the States. They're losing teachers left, right, and center. And it sounds like that's the same here in Canada, although we don't seem to talk about it as much. And I don't know if I'd want to be, I spent a lot of time in the school systems in Kelowna. And, once again, to me, what's the problem? These unions that started out as a good thing have now become the problem, because we've got too many teachers that are not good teachers, that are protected by unions, that put a bad rap on the other ones. We have unions that are more about collecting dues as opposed to helping develop teachers and invite teachers. They should be looking to invite more teachers. My sister's the same thing with as a nurse. It doesn't seem like they're really interested in helping develop nurses. They're really about how do we keep them so that we can keep collecting dues, right? So I'm generalizing, and that could be a way off statement, but that's how I feel based on what I think and see. And I know so many good teachers from Kelowna that said, "That's it, I'm done. I can't fight the system anymore." Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And like I work for the federal system, so I don't have any unions or any of that. But yet there's still a danger to that. Right. So it's kind of, which of the lesser evils do you want? Yeah. Like I'm still happy that I'm still proud that I'm happy that I'm a teacher, because I do inspire the young ones and teach them how to think critically. But it's a lot of work, and yeah. And the recruiting job of it, because if you're a good teacher, chances are some of these kids may want to be a teacher today. But I wonder how many of them actually, when you ask them what do you want to do when you grow up, how many of them will say they want to be a teacher. There was a time when we just seemed to have such respect for teachers. We had such respect for police officers, and don't get me wrong, like I said, like Randall said, no one thing is all good or bad. There's good and bad in everything. But why do we always, instead of removing the bad apples, we victimize all the apples as opposed to removing the bad ones? So I have a question. What
do you think is Canada's most valuable resource? And I have a point to follow this, but this is a true question I'm looking for an answer for. What do you think Canada's most valuable resource is? Whoa, this was not supposed to be that stunned. Deep thought.
Probably kindness.
Okay, so I hear people.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. I heard kindness. No, just kidding.
I know I heard kindness, but kindness comes from one space, right? Animals are in the animal kingdom are ruthless and kind and loving and whatever. We are within the animal kingdom. Therefore, when I hear kindness, I immediately just like, okay, that's a people thing.
Yep.
What about you, Rawle?
I would have said people. I think we have done a piss poor job over the last 30 years or so in educating our people. Our education system has been so eroded that we're not allowing our teachers to truly teach. We're not providing the resources that they truly need to be successful. So we have produced, I'll keep using our prime minister as an example because he's from that generation that came through.
He just cut his hair. Come on. All over the news.
Well, he still, he still has his playboy look, but that doesn't mean just because you're a playboy doesn't mean you know how to run a country. But
sorry,
I only use him as an example because he represents a generation that have come through what I say is the indoctrination camps of our universities. And this is why there is such a push for socialism. They learned these things in school. So I think our education system is not what it was. I don't think we're truly educating. Now, the education system, you can argue, was probably flawed to begin with because the education system was designed to ensure the workers can fit into the industrial model, which makes sense.
Now, bunch of little factories.
It makes sense. If you want people to be able to function out there, you have to train them. That's fine. But I think there was a time we actually taught people how to think, not what to think. I don't remember ever in my time in Canada where so many people can't stand this country. And I think that comes out of the academia world and it filtered into it. So
there's a good point, good segue in there too. So out of the academia world. Okay, so my first point and the reason why I asked the question, Finland of all beautiful little countries, one I have full intentions of visiting at some point in my life cycle.
Let's go. Since the Lillehammer Games, I want to go to Finland. So.
Let's go. We'll meet you in Toronto and we'll fly over because it's going to be cheaper to fly to Finland than it is to fly to Halifax. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the point is that is totally another show. Let's visit Eastern Canada with the same amount of cost to get to London, England, but yet we can fly to Vancouver. Jenny and I could book a flight right now. We could all meet in Kelowna and spend a third of the money. Whole other show. Yeah. Finland decided post-World War II, their only valuable resource was their people. It's a statement. It was a government decision. Access to education at all levels in Finland is free because they believe in educating their people, and their people are their most valuable resource. They are the teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, the office workers, the factory people. They are everything, and they do everything. Yeah. That's why I asked the question. And it is working in their model. They have a better population. They have a higher morale across their population. People are employed. Their cost of living matches what they're making. They've built these beautiful policies that make all of this work. Now, Finland is a very small country in retrospect to, say, Canada, but the story can be the same or
and the
be
model
similar.
Can work. It can work. Here.
And absolutely. And I said there was a segue into something else you were saying, and that was gone. I wanted to talk about Finland.
No, but that's a good point because, and this is why, you got people like in the States, and even here you hear politicians going, well, we need to move to the models of the Scandinavian countries, this democratic socialist mindset. And what people don't realize, and even the Scandinavian countries are telling people to stop saying we're socialists. We're not socialists. We are capitalist, democratic. They tried socialism I think it was back in the late 60s, 70s, Finland, Sweden, a number of them tried socialism. And it didn't work because it actually caused more harm than good. What people confuse is that these countries used their resources like oil, sold it to the free market, and the gains from that they used to build these social programs. But that's still not socialism. That's capitalism that provides these tools. And I'm sure if you're going to be educated for free in Finland, you have to give something in return. I'm all for that. I think every Canadian should not have to worry about university education. But in exchange for that, what service are you going to do for your country?
Yep. So my other point was, when we talked about indoctrination, and Jenny, you can speak to this specifically within the education system when it comes to what you teach, because what you teach is mandated by a group of people who work in the Ministry of Education, correct?
Yeah.
The curriculum that you teach is available to each and every one of us in this province or any other province in Canada, because the education curriculum is government specific, right? They tell you what you have to teach and what's going to change, right?
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate your statement, and this isn't at you, this is a national approach. How can we create free thinkers and critical thinkers when our government is telling us what we have to teach our children?
Yeah.
I mean, you do it in other creative ways. I respect that. But the bare bones of the question is, the government is telling you what you have to teach kids, right? As an educator, they are telling you. So, I mean, you use other resources, other spaces, other things. And I respect that. Many teachers do, but many teachers don't. This is what the curriculum is. This is all I teach. Did they meet the minimum check boxes?
In my opinion, I would have to say no. Because I'm just coming back from our experiences growing up in the public system of education. What we learned in grade 4 and 5, we are teaching now in grade 9. So we are going back. Like,
sorry, can you say that again?
What me and Randall learned in grade 4 and 5, we are now teaching in grade 9.
This is like grade 4, 5. We're talking like 92, 93-ish, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like
in that
the
short space of
multiplication.
time. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I knew that it had shifted, and I've been watching and hearing it shift throughout. But yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was quite that big of a gap in such a small period of time.
Yeah. And it's really frustrating to me because there's a lot of brilliant minds that go through the education system. And we are told like, no, well, that's not in the outcome. We can't do that. But I know a lot of teachers, we are like, okay, secretly, you could do this at home and I can help you with it. So we are kind of going on it that way, where it's not a part of the outcome.
So working within a creative environment anyway.
Oops, I think she just...
I watched her freeze, so maybe we lost her.
Yeah, I watched it freeze too, and then I thought it would come back. Well, that's the beauty of doing things online.
Absolutely, it is.
You're a prisoner to the Wi-Fi gods, right?
100%.
Yeah, but no. Well, we'll continue because there she is.
There we go. Hey,
welcome
back.
Welcome. We watched.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, no. Wi-Fi. So anyway, so from the early 90s till now, you've seen a drastic change in what's being taught, but when it's taught.
20 years.
Yeah.
20 years. That's so that fits into the time frame that I use. This indoctrination started. Going back to the indigenous thing, like how much indigenous history is being taught in schools today?
And please reference what we learned and how that's changed, because that's definitely a part of the puzzle.
Okay, so education has made great strides as of late, especially within Saskatchewan. That's kind of what employed me as a teaching coach. I was a Following Their Voices teaching coach, which is a great program. It takes indigenous histories and try to update them into the present now,
right,
through relationships. awesome program. It started in New Zealand. But I know when we were growing up, we didn't learn too much about the indigenous history. It was just kind of like, okay, the white guys won, the Indians lost type of.
More or less.
Yeah. And now we are starting to discover like there's many more levels to it. And us as like for me as a educator, an indigenous educator, is like we have to get the truth out there.
Yeah.
Because like history and like it's only what the victor's side. But if they won, then why are we still here?
Because they were generous and kind.
Yeah.
But
no, you're right. And you know, you're
I want to say something to that, but all I have is a laugh because generous and kind would not be the words I would.
But you're right. You know, history is written not necessarily just by the victors; it's written by academics, and academics work for the victors, and they're gonna write history that's gonna glorify the victors. I mean, yeah, that's common across this planet. But you know, I look at the little time I spent in the education system here in Toronto back in 70. When did I first move here? 77. I learned about Louis Rawle. I learned that I don't remember hearing about the residential school system at all. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. I just don't remember hearing it. But I would like to think that's something that I remember because I do love history. So I would have want to find out more about it. You know, it's only in later years I found out that the South African apartheid system was based on a residential school system modeled right here in Canada. So, and I think that's why I asked that question. It's the same thing like with Black Lives, Black History Month. Every February is Black History Month.
Yeah.
June is Indigenous Awareness Month, correct?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be, right.
Well, February is supposed to be Black History Month, but no, you know, we have to share it with other things. But I find those things problematic to begin with because number one, I don't do Black as a race, but I understand what they're saying. And so you're telling me somehow outside of February, I could change this pigmentation. So January, March, April, May, June, July, August. February is the only month I walk around with this. The other months I could change my pigment. So the reason why I asked that, because I think that's part of the problem. The majority of Canadians, I will stay with majority, don't know much about our Indigenous history and past.
And I think you nailed it, right? You know, going into that was like, we even just reflect on February 14th. Right? You have one day to show somebody else that you truly appreciate or truly love a way that you truly love them. You have one day for Mother's Day. You have one day for Father's Day. Well, that one day is an acknowledgement day, but that's not the only freaking
That's not
day.
the only day. And I think not knowing the history, it hinders all of us. I mean, I distinctly remember hearing, Indians being described as savages, right? And you know, in the soldiers facing these savages and how they conquered the savages. Now I understand in war, just like when you're playing sports, you have this disdain for the other side, but this isn't a sport thing. This is history. So was there no resistance? There was no fighting. The Indigenous just rolled over and go, just take what, no. So I asked that because I think the fact that we're not taught the full history of what contributes to the mindset that people have today, particularly around Indigenous people here in Canada to this day and around the world, but I'll focus on Canada, just the lack of knowing. How many people actually know someone that's Indigenous and spend time with them and talk to them and ask them about their lives? This is why I want, it's good to hear because, we assume all Indigenous people have the same concerns and wants and pains and so forth. And yeah, to some degree, we all have the same, but there also is a bit different because, it's in the poem, I wrote a poem called Calling Forth a Nation. And I stole this line from our Prime Minister. Indigenous people were forced to live as strangers upon their own lands, right? He said that in a speech because you're so down with indigenous, but yet you keep reinforcing that indigenous people have been made to feel, not saying that they feel that way, but the narrative from the nation, the ones governing, is that you have made them strangers on their own lands, as opposed to, okay, yeah, we did come here and we did conquer and so forth, but they're still here. To your point, it's not like you were wiped out, although they seem to do a good job of trying to do it. Same thing with Black people, and yet we're still here.
Mm-hmm.
So we couldn't all just have been passive. We couldn't have all just rolled over and take it easily. So I just find it interesting, the indigenous issue here in Canada, the way people still view indigenous. Some people still think, oh, they're dirty and they're not smart and all this. And I'm like, all you have to do is Google indigenous success.
Oh, there's so many.
Before COVID, I think 2018 was the year that they produced the most indigenous scholars graduating from universities and colleges. So many more jumping into the business world, becoming entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, all this stuff. You don't hear about it. I found it so insulting when the Prime Minister asked Jody to take the portfolio of Indigenous Indian Affairs. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because that office still oversees the Indian Act. And that's one of the things I want to ask you. For me personally, I think the Indian Act needs to go away, because it still governs how we treat Indigenous people in this.
I'm seeing a head nod, so yes.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, you think so too?
Oh yeah. Like, it's a joke. If it's like it really is
say
a
it,
joke.
Jenny. Speak it out. Spell it out.
Open the door.
Okay. So today, it's our treaty day up here. Now that basically means I go and get $5.
Yep.
What does $5 do?
What did it do then?
Let's
take a moment.
Yeah, what did
take
it
a
do
moment.
then?
What did it do then?
Time out. Treaty day, you go and you get $5.
Mm-hmm.
What do you
in the
mean?
city we grew up in, you'd go to City Hall and get your $5. But yes, so
They give
yes,
you $5.
to Rawle's,
so you're Indigenous, you get $5.
To Rawle's question, what? Right?
Oh,
so
it's the first I'm hearing of this. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Jen. Yeah.
Pull out that history, because there's a reason of that $5, right?
Okay, so I guess treaty day in a nutshell. It was almost like an honorarium for allowing us, or the settlers, to settle on our land. In a nutshell.
Okay.
It's almost like rent. That's what the Indigenous term is going around. We're going to go collect our rent.
Collect our rent.
Yeah.
$5.
And
wow.
$5.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And it basically comes from our trust fund, which is in charge of Indian Affairs. They're in charge of that. And so Randall's tax dollars doesn't go to that. It doesn't go to my education. My education came from the INAC funds, which the government basically said, okay, we're going to put money in here and interest is collected. That's where all our money's coming from. It's not from the tax dollars, and it's not from the foreign people. Sorry, no offense, Randall.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, but yeah. So it's just $5, and that's been established since the Royal Proclamation ish.
Honestly, this is
its purpose.
Honestly, it's the first I'm hearing of this.
It was funny, and I saw your smile, and you talk about it the way you do, Jenny. But I mean, and from my own, not my own treaty background, but from my treaty family members, it was a little bit of like a joke. Yeah, I'm just gonna go pick up my $5, right? My understanding, some of the original part of it was to like flour and lard and something else, right? Manufactured products by the individuals that took the products they grew here or made here and sold back. And exactly like as you said, the rent payment. The intent was like you were going to put that money back into the system. So you get that $5, but you're putting it back. You just got it on this end and you give it back on that end. It is I mean, $5 since the Royal Proclamation to now is a drastic difference in value. Is, you know,
so it's your form of reparation.
Yeah. But $5 isn't like,
Well,
what does it get you? Maybe a pop?
It's a joke.
Yeah.
The concept of it is like, here's your reparation. So
yeah.
And here it is only to those who are treaty, correct?
Oh,
Yeah.
It is only treaty. So anybody else through that mix who is either not registered or not treaty or whatever else don't have access to it. So it is only to registered indigenous individuals who maintain a treaty card or who have a treaty card, right? Not even maintain. You have to be registered to get one, and that's how you get your $5 a year.
I think the whole damn thing needs to be abolished.
Yeah,
to go
because and like just because of that, we are also capped with our like whole education thing and our healthcare. Like we only get subpar healthcare, which is stupid in itself. Like I got a 72-year-old man here living with me, and he's only getting subpar healthcare. He needs to go see like endocrinologists. He needs to see these specialists, and he's not getting that. He's just seeing the regular GP up here and getting medications that are no good to him. Right. Same with our education. We can only apply to certain universities, work with their system in order to get into another university, which is weird in itself. It's like, okay, like I graduated from NORTEP, which is the Northern Teaching University that was up here. It was through 2 universities. They abolished that. And so if I was to become a teacher, I'd have to go through another program. And I think that one's just based out of, I think it's the Gabriel Dumont Institute. And
which is the new SUNTEP.
Yeah.
Same concept, just it was more urban than northern.
So as an indigenous person, you can't apply to any university in Saskatchewan. There's only certain schools you can apply to.
Yes, and like if I wanted to go to University of Toronto or McGill, there's more hoops I have to jump through to get there.
Right.
Yeah. But ironically, and here's the kicker, if I was to apply to vet college at Saskatoon, they would accept me because they are wanting indigenous vets.
Gotcha.
And it is in Saskatchewan, the Vet Med program, the Western College of Veterinary Medicine, so services vets across Western Canada and Canada-wide, is the hardest, most competitive program the U of S can even offer, right? So University of Saskatchewan can even offer. They take 40 people and they get over 200 applicants. That being said, as Jenny said, as soon as you identify as something original, right, as an indigenous individual from this province, you're in the door.
I remember,
or the process is a lot faster anyway.
Yeah.
I used to do another podcast when I was in Kelowna, and we had an indigenous gentleman from Kamloops who sits on the on the Native Council. So on the show, I asked him, what do you think about the Indian Act? He goes, that's a loaded question. He goes, personally, I want it to go away, but he goes, there's many in the indigenous communities that don't want it to go away because they benefit from it. So it's like anything else. It's the same thing with racism. You got people that look like me that are telling others that look like me racism is going to stop them, but somehow it didn't stop them from succeeding. So that narrative serves them. So this is why it's important to keep that narrative going, because it serves them and it continues the victimhood. You ask many Canadians, about indigenous, and goes, what are they complaining about? They don't have to pay taxes. I go, okay.
But they do.
I go, you really think that? But they do, because that's what they're told. That's what they're told and taught. So people believe that. And I find it interesting, if you live on a reservation, you still can't own your own home. So how are you expected to build wealth like everyone else if you can't even own your own home? You can't go to the bank to get a loan to own your own home because you live on a reservation. But if you move off the reservation, you're still restricted. So it's like they keep finding ways to push the boundary of the reservation out even into society that further limits you.
Which sounds an awful lot like oppression.
Well, it does. And, you know, for me, I will argue anyone when they say Black people are struggling in this country. No, they're not. The ones that are still struggling are the original ones that we found here.
And the whole policy, and we're back to policy here, a government department of Indigenous affairs. There's a government department managing the Indigenous people of Canada.
So that's continued segregation. So how can we then look at Indigenous any other way than how we look at them because of what we're practicing? And if you have the Indian Act that is still the umbrella, then what are you telling everyone else?
Well, and this is all pushed out of federal, right? The province of Saskatchewan, within what it does within the reservations or anything, is actually absolutely nothing. It is a federal jurisdiction. And so it's feeding from the top.
What were you going to say, Jen? Sorry.
Oh, nothing. I was just agreeing with what Randall was saying.
Yeah.
And I think there's some misinformation in that, right? Like we see a lot of people, you know, we talk about, or we hear about, not even we talk about, we hear about people out there that are, you know, oh, well, my tax dollars go to support this and my tax dollars go to support that. And well, they don't have to pay taxes when, I mean, you and I, the three of us here, right? We know full well that's not the truth. But when we continue policies that say this group, right, and they're lumping this entire group into one department, needs a department to manage their affairs, you know, it's breeding that whole idea that you know, people that can't. Well, there's nothing about can't in that at all. It's just the government still has policies in place, such, you know, and that department runs the Indian Act.
You know, to touch on a point you touched on earlier, Randall, and to me, it's not necessarily about policies. We're going to always have policies.
Of course we are.
The question is, when do we stop and examine and see if the policies that have been implemented, if they're actually working?
This goes to your, this is the way we've always done it, so we're not doing it any different.
So, you know, what is it producing? Is it producing the desired result? Because a lot of these policies, I believe the intent is good. I'm just saying that. I think they're good, but sometimes I really wonder, because I'm not in the war room when they're creating these things. But I'll just go with, okay, your intent is good. But when do you stop and go, okay, the intent was good, but let's look at the actual result. And the actual result is harming more people than it's doing good. So when do we stop and go, okay, this is madness. We're pumping money into these policies that are not producing, we're not getting the return on investment. Let's pump the brakes. I remember in 2007, they had the Kelowna Accord that came out of Kelowna when Harper was in power. And Harper said, whoa, where's the money going? Which to me was a legitimate question. He got roasted. You hate Indigenous, you blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, it's a good question. It's the same thing with Blacks in the US. How has the welfare state helped Black people overall? It's harmed more. Well, it's harmed a percentage of people, and not just Black, Indigenous, Latinos. The welfare state has not worked. It has actually created people to be dependent and removed their incentive to strive for themselves. And I've seen similar to some degree in some of the natives that I've come across, but despite that, many of them fight through it and achieve amazing. And I think that's part of the biggest problem. We don't know of the successful Indigenous people in this country. The teachers. This is one of the reasons when Randall and I agreed to say we're going to invite guests. I think you were the first. You're the only one I think we thought of. Because,
it's true.
Well, you know, you check a lot of boxes, and we're all about just checking boxes here. So. But it's true, because I don't think we know the great success, and not just now, even going back into history, how many
Yeah.
indigenous people, despite the harshness of those early days,
Yeah.
still succeeded. When I talk to my Black American friends, I go, do you even know, even after slavery ended, how many Black people, the success and the things that they built and did? Yeah, did some of the whites come and destroy it because they were still brought into this old mindset? Definitely. But then they rose up again and they kept building. We're here, but we don't know the stories. We don't know who's become millionaires and because they provided something of value to our service. We don't know who's done things in arts and culture, who succeeded in business, who has succeeded in academia. We act like indigenous just all live on a reservation and all they do is hunt and fish.
I mean, if you could hunt and fish and actually come back with, items that you've hunted and or fished, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good way to spend a weekend, but that's not just the only part of the lifestyle, right? There's so much more to it than that.
And I think it's important that we find ways to I keep saying this, we need to find ways to educate the people, but I'll even go, I don't know, do the people even want to be educated? The more I say we need to know history, the more I realize people don't care about history.
Well, this goes back, Jenny said it earlier, right? Even just in the education system, the outcome-based teaching. What is the outcome? Are the boxes being checked? Can you go past the boxes? Yes, of course, right? But you have to find creative ways to go past that, because you are working in an outcome-based mentality.
How do you incentivize indigenous to be more, I'll say this as politely as I can, when they say, screw the government, we're going to become self-reliant, we're going to become self-sufficient, we're going to strive and succeed regardless of what roadblocks you put, right? When I was in Kelowna, West Bank First Nation, they're probably one of the richest bands in Canada. And I think they do a lot of good, but there's also, I see the way the chief and the named family live versus how the other indigenous live. So I would say greed doesn't know colors or ethnicity. Greed is greed. Doesn't matter. And people want power, and when they have power, they want to keep it. So how do we incentivize the average indigenous child to grow up realizing they're not a victim? Yeah, that is the history. That is the history. But how do we incentivize them to not? Because to me, it's the same argument with Black people. Too many Black people walk around thinking they're still victims. Yeah, I said it. That's right. They didn't say it. I said it. Call me a racist.
What I do is I look back to the shakers and the movers of the past. So like Buffy St. Mary, Redbone, Robbie Robertson, and I present it to the students. I'm like, they were brave enough to step outside of their box and make a statement. And that courage and that will runs through every one of us. You just got to tap into it and be courageous enough to do it.
I would add one more name to that list, Jenny Cook.
Yes.
You may not be at that limelight, but I think what you do is more important, and not more important, it's a different importance, because you're working with everyday people. That you have their effect is kind of distanced because they're removed in the sense of the time they lived and what they achieved from a national standpoint. But to me, it's just as important, boots on the ground, who's doing what in community. So I think that's very important. So again, it's reinforcing what I was saying, highlighting those have not so much success, but they had the courage to step out of, you're not putting me in a box. Right.
And that, I think, speaks even further to, we are a sovereign nation, right? As I heard you say, sovereignty, right? So we are a sovereign nation, but when we speak specifically of those individuals, and then of the work as well, Jenny, that you do, and that you pushing the boundaries on the areas that you can comfortably, without getting in too much trouble or whatever it is, I hear I am sovereign, and I am sovereign of myself, right? I owe it to me. My courage is me. My courage is through my roots, whatever, right? Like we can go so much deeper with that, but the statement is, I am sovereign.
And this is how you develop sovereignty for Canada, when you're sovereign yourself. That sovereignty for Canada is a natural reflection. But if you're not sovereign yourself, why would you then want to buy into Canada's sovereignty? That's why I asked you when we asked you last taping about what you think of Canada, and you called it home. And there's many Indigenous that feel that way. They go, this is home. This is where I was born. I understand because we're all descendants of ancestors. So we're not those ancestors. That was a different time, but we're descendants. And this is home. This is my chosen home. I wasn't born here, but I chose. I could have been an American citizen. I could have gone back to the States. I chose to be a Canadian because of why? The people. There's nothing wrong with the people in the States. I just vibe better here in Canada and with the people.
We all vibe better here in Canada.
Yeah, we do.
Let me just say.
Regardless of what's going on, I still love this country. But living in this province and traveling up north and getting to know, going into different Indigenous communities and spending time and getting to know them, you get to see differently. You realize, man, they're just people like you and I. They're no different.
We are all just people.
Just people.
We all bleed red.
That's right.
I remember
we all see the same. We all
do the same. That's why I started with this quote. We're all on this planet. I remember Chappelle did a skit on, has any of you ever met an Indigenous person? A Native person? I met one the other day. And I go, hey, what's up, my brother? He goes, how? But Chappelle, I think humor is we need to use more here. But he was saying it's like, basically, how many of you have actually met an Indigenous person?
Yeah.
How many of you actually met, not even know, have actually met someone? Because you don't see them. And it is, to some degree, it's true. You walk downtown Toronto, now, like, how would you know? I don't want to assume, but we have to go into their communities and ask, not just go in. Ask, can I come in? I want to learn. Here in Toronto, just on the west side of Toronto, well, not just a couple hours, we have the Six Nations, right? And many people go in the nation on the reservations to buy cigarettes and stuff like that. I go in and actually talk and get to know them. Well, go to their restaurants. Go to their restaurants and spend time. Go to a coffee shop on the reservation and just hang out and spend time. You'll notice they're really no different than you and I. And I think we need to remove that stigma that somehow Native people are different. They're not. Their practices are different. Their customs may be different, but we actually all have a lot of the same customs and we just practice it.
Yeah.
But the stigma around, this is why, that bonehead in Ottawa bugs me, because he said the Indigenous issue is going to be the most important issue in his.
People shouldn't be an issue. People shouldn't be an issue.
So we have the Indigenous issue and we have the women's issue. Notice a pattern here. Where's the man's issue?
somewhere with our cold. Let's not even go there.
But
while you were speaking, Rawle, because I today came a little bit more prepared for this show than I have for any other show. I give you the Two of Cups.
The Two of Cups. What's the Two of Cups?
You see yourself reflected in the eyes of another and begin to truly perceive yourself. From this place of intimacy, visions can be shared, dreams hatched, and loneliness washes away through communication.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You planted that, didn't you?
No, because the card that tried to jump out instead of it was not.
No, you didn't pull that. That's a plant. I love how don't you? That's why I say I love the way the universe works, man.
Yep.
How apropos is that? right?
It's all about communication, and
It
it
is.
totally goes well into what you were saying. And I know, Jenny, you experienced this with the many outfitters that bring in many people who are not from this country to hunt and fish in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't grow up that far north, but I've grown, 2 hours south of there is where we grew up. Right. And we saw it even in the city of Prince Albert, the plates of the vehicles that did not belong to any country or any province of Canada would roll through, and you knew where they were going. They're going to the hunting and fishing camps and doing their thing. But that still isn't getting into the community. That still isn't learning about people, right? So I mean, people think or create perceptions, right? And this comes back to the communication component of the Two of Cups. You've created a perception, therefore you view things with the perception you have of the thing, whether you're taught that perception or however you arrived at that perception. But as our good friend Mark would say, perception is not reality, right? And so
yeah,
the
I want to ask, and I'm going to cut Randall off because I'm only asking this because I know I'll forget it. Have you experienced a lot of racism in your life?
Yes.
What sort of racism?
Being followed in stores. No help when I need help, like Sports Check and other stores, like big companies like that. They run away from me. And I'm like, I need that.
And is that a common thing within other Indigenous people that you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, like the misconceptions of us, like a lot of people in the north here, there's like a lot of money up here. Like we have millionaires, and who are First Nations and who aren't. But we have a lot of money, and we go down to the city and we just dress in regular clothes, jogging clothes, sweatshirts, whatever.
But you don't go out in feathers and the big ceremonial hats all the time?
No. But they take one look at us and they treat us like we have nothing.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, fine. If you don't want our money, we'll take it somewhere else. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's the key. I think same with Black people, Indigenous people need to understand their economic might. Right? You contribute greatly to this economic engine, and the narrative is you don't. And I think that's one of the key messages that needs to go away. Okay, so your experience is not different for from a lot of Black people or other people that are not European, because racism to me is not a color, although they've made it a color. It's whites hating everyone else. And racism to me is not about hate. It's a system designed to use power to limit groups of people. Right? I always tell people, I don't know if I actually experienced a lot of racism. I don't remember anything stopping me from going where I wanted to go. Did I experience discrimination and prejudice? Definitely. But racism doesn't mean there aren't individuals in these institutions that aren't thinking that way, right? So, but it's interesting because I don't really, I think Indigenous people need to stand up and not just talk, but have a different conversation, because
and I think individuals need to invite themselves into those conversations too, right?
Definitely.
I mean, don't show up and think that you know the world, which is where I was going, right?
I agree.
If you want
to
learn, if you want to see, if you want to learn, to understand, to seek knowledge of things you know nothing about, you invite yourself into circles, go to school, go to university, go to study whatever it is that you want. People work the same way, right? If I want to learn more about the people of L'Orange, I need to go to L'Orange. I need to go and experience a conversation, right? I need to open the door, because if I go in, and we talked about this in the last show, right? This is just the directions of conversation. If I go in and tell you what I'm going to do to help improve or to change or to whatever, there's a different form of rhetoric that's going to come back versus tell me about you, help me learn, help me understand, and let's create this new beautiful thing together. But
On
you
that
have to be open and honest, right? This comes back to the Jenny and I talked for probably 2 hours after the last show or more, and I said, this comes back to sorry.
Talked without me.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. And I had brought up I love the term and I love the vibe and I love everything about namaste, right? The light in me sees the light in you. But if you're going into a conversation or you're into a community without letting your light be out there, right? So that the person on the other end of the conversation or in the circle or whatever it might be, if they can't see you for who you are, or what you want to, what you're trying to learn or accomplish or work together with, you're not going to be met openly, right? Yeah. So if you want to learn, make a point of going to learn, but you have to leave your little bubble. You have to break the walls.
You have to seek first to understand before being understood. I think if you really
absolutely
have a flowing conversation. And to that point, Randall. So Jenny, what's the name of your tribe again?
I am Cree.
Cree. Yeah. So tell me about Cree. What's Cree known for? What are the Cree people known for?
Wow.
A lot of our language. Basically, Cree is one of the largest indigenous languages in Canada. Yeah. So if I was to go to Toronto and speak Cree, they would understand what I'm saying.
Right.
I don't know.
It's a pretty consistent language. Doesn't matter what part of the country you're in.
Yeah.
That is my understanding. Cree is one of the bigger tribes.
Yeah.
That's the right word in here in Canada. So.
And what I found is we're kind of the bullies of Canada and the indigenous people, because we started off in Northern Ontario and somehow we kind of pushed our way over here.
Right.
So it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, we're kind of bullies.
Well, the history I know.
I have a question too. Jenny, you speak Cree?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cree is the English term, correct? Right? When you say Cree, that is the term that the English gave to. So what is Cree in Cree? Right. What is that word? Does it start with an N?
It can.
Okay.
Up here, it starts with a K, and it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't say it right now.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot for that.
Yeah.
It was just another thought, another question.
Instead of, but if it comes to you, but
I think
give us, tell me, if I was to say, hey, Jen, what's the weather like today? How would you say that in the Cree language?
Medogisago.
Say that again.
Medogisago.
Medodisiga.
Gisagao. Yeah, that's basically, it's a nice day.
Okay. How do you say your name in Cree? Or what is your, I didn't say what Jenny Cook is an English name. So what, do you have a Cree name?
If I was to say it in Cree, it'd be like, Chenny.
Because the J makes a CH sound, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then Cook would be Cook.
Again, so I'm going, I see where Rawle's going with this, and we're putting you on the spot. So Cook, again, is an anglicized name given to you through your own historical experiences and learning and education of self. What was your last name before Anglicanism happened to it? Do you know?
I don't know.
No. You don't know? Okay, so I worked with somebody who, and I'm not even going to attempt to say it because it was Northern Cree, but she was born from, the last name was Running Man, and that was what they gave her because that described what her family did, which was medicine runners and information runners for going to all the different places. She has fought and fought and fought and fought and finally won. Her daughter carries the Cree name, but she had so much paperwork and so much fight to go through to change her Anglicized last name to her traditional last name. And so when you spoke of like things happen and they take forever and sometimes you just don't do it, that one for the individual I used to work with, she wasn't giving up. She wasn't doing it for herself. She was ensuring that the family name could continue on and that it served its purpose in the conversation, in the beautiful landscape, this multicolored, blanket that we all live on, to ensure that that name continued living, and why it was an important name, because they served everybody serves an important purpose with wherever they are, but medicine didn't make it from one tribe to another if the runner didn't take it, right? And so, but the paperwork she had to go through, she's like, years of work to get her daughter's name back to its traditional last name. Why is that so complicated?
Well, once again, governments and how we treat indigenous people and what we value. And I say we, government or people. It's one of the things I want to ask. We talked about history. How important is indigenous history to indigenous people?
Well, to the average indigenous person, it's not really important. But to like the educated ones and ones that want to make a change, it's very important, because in order to know where you're going, you have to know the past.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, so and see like where they messed up so we don't do that same thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's
to
keep the traditions.
Sorry.
Okay, go for it.
Nope. Keep going. Sorry.
To keep the traditional knowledge alive, that's vitally important for us.
Yeah. So is that where the knowledge keeper concept comes in, right? Because I don't remember that from our childhood. I remember that more just in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. And that traditional knowledge keeper was that the history, keeping tradition alive, the passing of the stories, right? That's that component of it.
Yeah.
But I think today now everyone needs to kind of be a knowledge keeper to some degree. It's the same thing in Black, and we're talking generalizing collectively. Because I find many Black, and once again, when I say Black, I'm not talking race. I'm just talking just the way we still identify. Don't know their real Black history, right? Don't know that we come from a long lines of kings and queens and architects, but we also come from a long lines of thieves and murderers and teachers and plumbers and the full spectrum of life. But particularly the history, I agree with you, Jenny, the less you know about history, the more you're going to repeat these things. And this is what I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of repeated patterns because we're not wanting to learn from the past. And maybe it's not so much wanting to learn from the past. We've been taught to fear the past because of what happened, because of the indignities that were placed upon indigenous people. So we're taught to fear it. And I think a lot of white people have been conditioned to put their heads in the sand because of that. And that shame and guilt and fear has been perpetuated, so they don't want to know. And then you get into this generation who went through the school system and have learned these things. And this is why you're seeing such a disdain for Canada, because they were taught, white Europeans are evil. Look what they did to the Europeans and blah, blah, blah. And so now they're growing up hating everything about Canada, because Canada is one of those countries that was started out of white supremacy and all this bullshit that we teach. There was no white supremacy back then. They were doing what they understood for their time. Doesn't mean it was good or bad. It's just what happened. Right. So I just it seems to be a common theme coming back. Education is key. Real, honest, truthful education, not to be afraid of what we come from. Sorry, Randall?
Which is learned through conversation. And getting out of your bubble and expanding what you view as community. Because this community is 7 billion people plus, right? We just happen to live in this small little pocket of it. But our community, because we don't live here alone, is 7 billion people. Step out of the box.
And I don't know if our population is getting out of control. I actually don't think so. I think actually we have lots of room on this planet. I just think it's how we live, these mass cities that we live in. I think we need to spread out more, and technology can afford us that. But regardless of that, I think wherever you spread, you're going to run into other people now. This is 2022. We're not going to come into anything new. I mean, unless you're in the deep forest and you started, you come across people, not tribes, that you've never seen before, that have never seen the outside world. You're going to run into people that are indigenous to something. And the key is, are we going to keep showing up as conquerors? Or are we going to show up and say, hey, I would love to live here. And being that you're the steward of this piece of the land, am I welcome to live here with you? Because I think if they had done that back in the day, well, actually they did.
They did. They
It's
did.
only
The
when it's only when
original, yeah.
It's only when the greed of power mongers and the government got involved, shit started to go downhill.
Because the original travelers, right, explorers, whatever, that's exactly it. They were just creating some element of a map.
Yeah.
Right. Where does the land start? Where does land finish? And who's in the middle of that whole story? Right. And there was a lot more. How do you stay alive and communicating and finding ways to communicate with the original explorers? I think it was everything after that was land acquisition, and that funneled through great powers.
Yep.
Do you know one of the first, translators, and I think it was in the Quebec area, was a Black man who came across on those ships that acted as a translator with the indigenous tribes of the area. So how does someone become a translator to people that you supposedly haven't met before? So did he somehow come here before? You know what I mean?
Or is there commonalities in other languages?
There you go. There is commonality. We don't always, we could find ways to communicate. So I just think when the average people came here, they didn't come with the idea of conquering, right? Not the Christopher Columbus story, right? Because I don't know how you can discover something where there's already people living there, but that's a conquering mindset. You got to remember, Columbus was in charge by Ferdinand and Isabel, the King of Portugal. Yep. Why? Because they wanted to expand their empire. A lot of the original settlers that came to Canada and what's now America came running from persecution, wanting freedoms and a different way of life. So I just think, I think it's important to really understand all of our history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of it. But at the end of the day, we live in today's now, this present day, and we are still somehow stuck. It's us versus them. There's a difference between Randall and me. There's a difference between Randall and Jenny. No, we're both human. All three of us are human. And it doesn't matter what tribe you come from. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. We all are bound by gravity to this planet. And we all are dependent on the same thing: food, water, and air. We need shelter. We want to feel safe. We want to have the means to provide for our families and make sure they're safe. I don't know anyone that doesn't want that. Doesn't matter what tribe you come from. So I just think as Canadians, we need to do a better job in recognizing how we still view and look at Indigenous people. And I don't give a crap what the government says. I'm going to put it back on the people now. We're supposed to be smart and intelligent people. I'm going to put it back in the people. It is upon you now to learn and to help remove the stigma that we still have around Indigenous people. Because
can I add a Cipro quote to that?
I was just going to finish this one point.
Okay.
So the last point is, to your thing, there's no Indigenous issue. They're not issues. So go ahead, yeah.
My Cipro quote is, and I know this happens, and not specifically just within Indigenous or Black lives or anything, right? Once you become familiar with a community, with a people, with a practice, does not make you the expert. Do not speak for others. Let others speak. Right, Jenny? Right, Rawle?
Yep, I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
Just because I'm a white guy doesn't mean that I know what I'm talking about. But
yeah, but even as a
and just
black
because I
guy,
spent 6 months in there doesn't mean I know what I'm talking about, right? Let the experts still tell the stories. It's
but
their
even
story.
as a black guy, I don't know the whole black story. I just know my black experience, and that's the thing. Is like, I don't ridicule other blacks who make what I think have a victim mentality. You know why? That's their experience. I just want to understand why you think that way. I just want to understand why you feel that way. But you don't have to feel the way I do. You don't have to see the world the way I do. I think we all have an individual experience that ties or connects to the collective experience.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no one indigenous collective experience, or no one indigenous black experience, or white, or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's important. I think if we take the time to get to know individuals and have conversations, and meaningful conversations, in the sense of, so tell me about your life, Jen. What would you like to share? And I'm asking because I want to know. I want to learn. Not now, but just anyone.
Yep.
I think that's more inviting. And say, what? I don't know much about indigenous people. Could you educate me? Instead of going, well, just go Google it. Because I hear that in the black community as well. It's not my job to teach white people about. I go, whose job is it then? It's your story. You're part of that
Google
story.
was created by a bunch of white guys.
Yeah, so who better to teach? Yeah, I invite people to Google. But if you're asking me a question about my black experience, I'm okay. I'm gonna share with you, because who better to teach that story? So to some degree, we're experts in our lives. But to Randall's point, leave. I am not going to talk in great lengths about the Indian Act, because I really don't know if I understand it that well. I have very little, but I do believe that's something that needs to go. If we're going to move past this ignorance of how we still view, because I think any prime minister that comes down the pipeline on this, not willing to say we need to open that up and deal with it, is a hypocrite. There are hypocrites. And not just the prime minister, everyone that serves in parliament, whether it's provincial or federal, should be saying, okay, I don't want to hear the indigenous issue is the most important thing to me. And you're not willing to say, let's sit down and talk about how do we move away from the Indian Act.
Yeah. Okay. So
anyway,
on that, I want to spend the next couple minutes wrapping up.
No,
yes, we have to.
No,
we're going to be approaching 2 hours again.
Are you guys going to go talk? Are you guys going to go talk for another 2 hours without?
Well, maybe, but it might be a little later, because there's, we have life
anyway.
too. Anyway, Jenny, I want to extend a massive amount of gratitude, a giant thank you for joining us, not once, but twice in a row. And to know that you are welcome back anytime. And we'll probably, send out another feeler somewhere down the road, like, hey, come talk, come join us this day. We'll figure it out within the school schedule. We'll get that sorted. So a huge amount of gratitude and deep thanks for joining us again. What you have I see the brain thing going on.
This thought just came. I don't know if this is possible, but man, how cool would it be if we did a taping while she was in class and we asked some of her students questions?
Oh, that would be interesting. I know that there's some loops and stuff. We'd have to figure out some backgrounder in there. I know there's some rules, but
it just came to me
really
as you said that. So something
it'd be really cool for sure.
I think it'd be really cool. Is the majority of your students indigenous or?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think that'd be a really cool experience if we could do something like that. If obviously you got to talk to your administrators and that sort of thing. So.
We'll figure it out. We'll
figure it out.
Something.
Yeah,
Something in the background.
It was just a thought that came as Randall was talking. So
perfect. So Jenny, I invite you, after 2 sessions of spending hours with us and our lifelong friendship you and I have had, what would you give back to us, or what could you give back to our listeners about your experience here, or about anything you want to share, just as part of our wrap up?
Been fun.
Well, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah. Very. It's nice to get a different perception on like issues and things that actually mean something to indigenous people, and getting our voices out there more. Yeah, and just keep on keeping on.
Well, that's
Well,
cool.
thank you.
So, yeah,
go ahead, Ralph.
No, you go.
Okay. So after our last show, I was able to send Jenny, I think it was last week, I sent her a text that I'd had this vision, this moment of absolute presence, and this beautiful vision came to me where Jenny was swimming through my living room. So, clearly this is not physical, but I'm in the physical space and I could see everything, feel everything, smell, hear absolutely everything. And there's this boy sitting across the living room from me on the love seat. I'm on the sofa and he's got his head down and he's playing with his box of crystals. And I shoot Jenny a message as soon as I, kind of come to and have a minute to like, yep, I did see all that. Yep, that all just happened. Yep, right. And it is like burned in my head. I'm able to repeat it like I was sitting there again. And we had this beautiful back and forth conversation just about, I saw Jenny swim through my living room, which is fun in itself. This young man playing with this box of crystals, and Jenny's words to me, "Can you help him?" And I said, absolutely, of course. I don't know who he is, what he is, where he came from. I don't know his age. I know he's a young man with dark hair. Hey, and he had a box of crystals. Whatever the universe brings, it brought me that to start with. And the direct question from Jenny, so universal, right? Can you help him? Yes, I can. I don't know who it is. I don't know when it's going to show up, and I don't know what's expected of it, but I know I've already said to the universe, I'm doing it. So there's that.
Well, again, just goes to show you how we're all just so connected, and we're not disconnected as the way we like to or been conditioned to think, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and we're connected deeper than social media.
Yeah. Well, yeah, social media is just a tool. It's how we choose to use the tool. We create these things and then we act like somehow they just magically showed up. They didn't, we're the ones creating them. We're the ones supporting it. We're the ones that are on these platforms, and it's just like, we like to ridicule billionaires. Well, how did they become a billionaire? Stop going to Starbucks. Maybe then they wouldn't have become a billionaire. Or, why do you use Amazon? Oh, because it's convenient and it keeps money in your pocket. Oh, so you understand what Jeff Bezos was doing. So,
and why he no longer operates out of his garage.
Yeah, exactly. So my thing is, we need to stop this. But to Jenny's point, it's about having real conversations and getting to know people in a different way, how they live. So coming from Kelowna and being associated with the Silic people, I know there's a big push to maintain their language, and because of that, you get, got to meet elders and talk to them and understanding the importance of their language to them and why it's important and all these things. And I'm sure it's no different than for the Cree people or for any people. Everyone wants to maintain their languages and customs. So I just think we just need to keep having more of these conversations. I think this is why Randall and I are committed to talking to everyday Canadians, everyday people, regular people you don't hear of. You don't see their names splattered on some marquee anywhere, and they're not trying to push anything. Well, if you had a book to push, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But what I'm saying is people aren't going to come onto this because they're looking to peddle something. We're looking for real people that can tell us about their everyday life. Because I think we get caught up too much in talking about the collective in the sense of all Indigenous people are this way, well, all Black people are this way, all Europeans are this way, or all China. No, that's a lie. There is some truth to profiling, but there's also things called balance. I may understand what
we are all about,
but I want to know more than just what the perception tells me, what the bias tells me, because we all have our bias. But can you step out of your bias and say, you know what? This is what I think I know, and I'm starting to realize I don't know much. I want to learn more. Help me to understand. Are you willing to help me understand? And more than likely, someone will go, well, ask me a question. So, Jenny, I want to give you not the last word, but the last few words. But can you say a goodbye in Cree to the people that are listening? Or whatever word you would like to part with.
Travel well, whatever. Yep.
Yeah, we don't really say goodbye in Cree. There's no word for it.
Because it's a see you again or see you, like a see you soon again, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no element of never seeing you again, right?
Until we meet
Yeah.
again. Until we
meet again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know how to say it in Cree, so until we meet again.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's not. It's coming from a Cree woman, so it's Cree as far
There
as
we
I'm
go.
concerned.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't. It's like everyone. So it's not trying to put you on the spot, but I just think it's important when we have someone that can share their understanding of their culture and their people and their history. It's important. So
and their own experiences.
Yeah, because I can't tell you how to say goodbye in Swahili, because I don't speak Swahili, and I don't come from the Swahili people. So
I couldn't tell you how to say goodbye in Low German, and I come
exactly
from half a family of Low German.
exactly.
So there's that.
But I think it's important more so not so much. And the only reason I did that because I know language is such a big thing in trying to maintain. And it just, like I
language
said,
is beautiful. It's another art.
Well, and that just it. And maybe it highlights why it's not so much about preserving the Cree language nationally in the sense of it needs to be an official language, but how do we encourage young ones to want to really understand their Cree history, or their Blackfoot history, or their Okanagan history, or their
Sioux,
Mohawk
Dakota,
history,
Dene.
Dakota, whatever. There's so many amazing tribes that make up Turtle Island, and how do we encourage young ones to want, and when I say young ones, I don't mean just indigenous young ones, all young ones to learn that you live on a land that at one time had many different tribes, and many of those tribes are still here, and many of those tribes still have their customs and their language, and invite you to want to understand it. You don't have to become proficient in it, but to appreciate it and understand that we came onto lands where there were people already living here that had their own economic way of understanding life, their own financial way of understanding life, their own spiritual practices, their own emotional and mental makeup of life. So I think that's an important message that we need to put out, because that to me, that's how we get past the stigma of indigenous issues.
And on that note, friends.
On that note, yes. Close it off, Randall.
We are at the end of episode 5. Can you believe episode 5? Jenny has been here for 4 or 5. Yep. It's little hand claps in the background. We are back in a couple of weeks for episode 6, where we will continue. Where's the balance? A conversation, not a debate, a discussion. And the conversation will continue. Who knows who we will have up next? The next show could be another special guest, could be the two of us recap. Who knows? And that's the beauty of Where's the Balance, is we find a balance in something and we work towards it. We usually have a good theme. We have a good topic. Again, we have Jenny Cook, who was her second time with us this month. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having you on the show again. We will be back, and we will continue this conversation and continue to discuss Where's the Balance. I am Randall Keays. I'm my co-host Rawle, James, and we are ending episode 5. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Okay. I want to stop the recording.